It is Indiana in the morning. It's WCCS 101.1 FM, AM 1160, WCCSradio.com. If you have a question for Bob Pollock, you can give us a call right now, 479-1160, 349-WCCS. Mr. Pollock is with us, Extension Service, and we're glad that he is because we've got questions at 7:45. Our visit presented by Marcus & Mack, voted best law firm and best personal injury lawyer 3 years in a row in the Best of Indiana County contest. Visit them online at marcusandmack.com. Good morning to you.
Good morning to you.
It is that season of the year when we start to look at, the plants are starting to green up, especially the shrubbery, the shrubbery around the house. And some of that stuff very easily gets out of control, and they turn shaggy. And maybe we want to cut them back to a much more manageable size than they've become. Maybe they're hiding windows, or they're just, you can't get between them as they border your house. I don't know that this is the best time, and maybe the dormant season is a better time to shape them. And I know that it's dependent upon what that shrub might be. But in general, when you have a shaggy little shrubbery, trimming them back can be a scary thing because you don't know that it's going to come back, or that you might have to go a season or two before it's back the way you want it to look. Am I characterizing that correctly?
That's true. And it helps a lot to know the plant itself. Mm-hmm. What's the name of the plant? That goes a long way to helping identify how we can work with that plant, the needs of that plant. How big's that plant going to get? And that can be a little bit elusive. You can read the tags, when you purchase the plant. Mm-hmm. You can look it up, and it'll say, it'll get to be 3 feet wide and 4 feet tall. And a lot of times, it might do that. But there's a good chance it might not either. And if you just left it alone, and a lot of that goes back to the conditions that you have to grow that plant. Are they really good? Mm-hmm. So it grows bigger than that. Another way they'll kind of define that as growth. Here's how large this plant will get in 10 years. Is sometimes how it's. So you have to kind of read the fine print a little bit. It gets 3 by 4. If that's in 10 years, then what's it going to be in 20 years? Mm-hmm. So plant selection takes a little bit more effort than just looking at that plant and saying, that has nice flowers. That's what I want. Or the color is right, or the texture is right. But just kind of putting the whole package together to say, okay, this is what the characteristics of this plant, and I think this will fit into my landscape here or there. And then knowing that helps a lot, because if you can size plants to begin with, as you design things and lay things out, then it goes a long way to minimizing having to deal with some of the overgrown stuff. Mm-hmm. You can go back to the Colorado spruce trees, on either side of the front door on the house, or even at the corners of the house, it was nice.
I'm looking over at the Jimmy Stewart Museum because they've got two lovely trees out there, but the one covers over part of the marquee as you're looking at it on the street. And I don't know that was the intention when the tree was put in there. The marquee, actually, I don't know which came first, the marquee or that particular tree. But trimming that tree back would allow them to actually see the marquee so much better.
Right. Or selecting a plant that would fit into that space. Now, we know that, those are Christmas tree species. And the reason those were selected to go there is because they are Christmas tree species and the Christmas tree cap of the world. Mm-hmm. So they knew when they put those in there that they might get overgrown if they aren't attended to. Mm-hmm. But that's a perfect example of, in your own landscape of figuring out that, most of those conifer or evergreen species, the spruces, the firs, etc., hemlocks, can get very large, 50, 60, 70 feet, out in the open space. There are a lot of different cultivars of things now that are smaller. So you can kind of get that same effect, that evergreen effect, the color, the texture of those plants. You can find that in dwarf or, other, sometimes they're even grafted, but mostly they're just dwarf forms of some of these conifers. They can get a little pricey, but they can fit in a space and provide that need in the landscape and work and not have to do so much pruning.
Yeah.
I guess is where this is all coming back around to, is care and maintenance of plants over time.
Yeah.
And I mean, I've done it too. I moved a bunch of stuff around this late winter. Just I didn't like it there, or it got too big for there. I didn't want to have to, train it, prune it, maintain it as much. So, and I look stuff up on plants.
That's your profession.
I kind of, yeah. It interests me and it fascinates me, and but where a plant is, the soil it's growing in, the environmental conditions does greatly influence the overall effect that plant has and the growth that plant has. So if it's in poor soils, it may never, like street trees.
Sure.
Look where we have to stick street trees in the ground. These little holes amongst concrete. If you took that same tree, okay, you picked out two that were the same, and same age, grown in the same nursery, planted one on the street and one in your yard.
The one in the yard's going to get much bigger.
Probably, yeah, because it has more open space. It has more soil to grow in. It probably has a lot better soil and growing conditions. You don't have the heat effect from, all the buildings, the structures, the concrete, all those things that give off heat and suck in heat and create, adverse growing conditions for plants. So it can be very different.
Yeah.
And it's kind of neat to see that. And structure-wise, too, a plant where it's restricted, by a building, by structures, by the amount of sunlight it gets, versus a plant that's out in the open. And if we just think about plants that are out in the woods, a lot of times, a lot of the trees and things in the woods are very narrow. They don't get real wide. There's a few exceptions to that because they've got lots of neighbors there, lots of other trees and things growing that keep them narrow, and they're always reaching up for sunlight.
Yeah.
Because that forest floor can get very shaded. And you take that same plant, you could have taken those same seed, grown one there in the woods and grown one in an open space, and they will have very different branching forms and structure and density and all of that.
Over your left shoulder is the enormous tree at the church across the street.
Yes.
And that tree it's huge. And I imagine when it was planted with the size that it was, and you could actually see the church much better. And it probably was, a much prettier picture, I would guess, than what that tree is able to provide now. It's very majestic, but sometimes you wonder, is that tree ever going to come down? And how difficult would it be if somebody decided that tree had to go? Say it a lot of the pine and fir trees, they're diseased now. Say that one ever got sick. Taking it down out of there would be a tremendous chore.
Yeah, although the people that do that, they usually have the tools and equipment to, take those things kind of down quicker than you'd think you'd be able to, because they can piece it down. They can.
That's what they would have to do.
Yeah, they'll go up either in a bucket truck or they can climb it, and they'll take the limbs off, and then you'll have a pole left, and then they'll piece that pole down. Yeah. So you can get into tight spaces and do that pretty safely. But even, and I'm not saying not to plant larger plants, but if you choose to do that, then you need to understand that you're going to have management. You're going to have pruning. You're going to have training, pruning practices over the life of that plant, so that Colorado spruce tree doesn't get 50 feet tall. You've kept it in check as much as you can through pruning on an annual basis to keep it smaller, so that it fits into that landscape and does a better job.
See, that's what I think needed to be done across the street there
Yeah.
at the museum. I thought that would be a much better presentation. But okay.
Suggest that to Mr. Van Horn.
Yeah, well, we'll find out. Maybe one day we'll do that. I think, though,
And that over there, too, the other thought process that might be there is, hey, when those get too big, we'll take that out and come in and replant another one that's smaller.
yeah,
That's another way to
that could be
manage that
something
situation.
that's in the plans. I'm sure that I'm not the only person that's noticed how big those trees have gotten.
Right, yeah.
But I notice it as well with people, particularly rhododendrons.
Yeah.
And I would assume dormant season is when you want to trim them back. But rhododendrons can overtake an entire house. You can not even know there's a house there.
That's right. We have examples,
Yeah.
around that.
I think of that place up in Strongstown.
Yeah.
It's like that. The whole house is obscured by, you don't even know there's a house there because of the rhododendron.
Yeah, how large it can get.
Yeah.
And even within rhododendrons, there are different species that have different sizes overall. There's rhododendron maximum, which that probably is an example
I would
of.
think.
And literally, I mean, that's its name, and it's named well.
It's living up
that
to
if,
it.
Yes, if you don't do anything to it over time, it will literally grow to that size. And there might have been originally more than one plant there. There might have been a couple, but
And they've grown together.
in any case, looking at those species and hopefully, you're purchasing from a reputable place that actually has things tagged to what they really, really are. And then you can, makes it easier to do that. Yes, timing. So, you have like yews, for example. Those tend to be, there are some upright forms of those, but then there's many of them are called spreading yews. Well, that's because they spread. They might only get 3 or 4 feet tall, but they might spread 8 or 10 feet.
Yeah.
One plant.
Like mine have.
Right, over the years. So just, knowing the growth habits helps too. And then keeping after things when you start to see it maybe creeping out into the sidewalk or into the driveway or into the house, that we take note of that and do something when we can prune just a little bit off. Sometimes we can pinch the tips of the branches off because that'll pinch the new buds off and help hold that plant in check. And you can do that with your fingers when the growth is tender, when that new growth comes out, or you can shear them. I always like to, I'm not a huge fan of shearing because you get a wall there. You're just haphazardly cutting everything back versus, kind of hand pruning, selectively pruning, even yews, because that gives a little bit more texture. It gives some open spaces in there to let a little bit more light in. Because when we shear things, we can tend to end up with a very narrow foliage. It might only be 1 or 2 inches of foliage there versus having a little bit of holes in there. Doesn't really affect it. But anyhow, we'll have to take this to next time around.
Know your plant, manage your plant. It's Indiana in the Morning. It's WCCS. Good morning.